All right, looks like the numbers have stabilized. Thanks to everyone for joining today. Welcome to Your Guide to Fire Service Policy in 2026. My name is Michaela Campbell. I am the Director of Government Affairs for the Congressional Fire Services Institute, or CFSI, and I will be moderating today's conversation. We are going to be breaking down what's ahead in Washington, D.C. next year, the congressional calendar, key fire service issues, and what departments and organizations can do to be prepared. We put this out, but no policy background is needed for the conversation. All questions are welcome. Just type them in the chat or the Q&A as we go along, and we'll take them all at the end. I'm very thrilled to be joined by our panelists today. We have Sean Carroll with the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, Ryan Woodward with the National Volunteer Fire Council, and Ken Lasala with the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Okay, so Ryan, let me turn to you. We know that there are tight majorities this Congress. It's a packed election year schedule in 2026, and there's going to be some recesses leading into the November election. So what do these dynamics, the tight margins and an election year, mean for Congress's ability to pass legislation in 2026?
Thanks, Michaela. Historically speaking, because Congress is on a 2-year election cycle, every other year we run into this, coming up on 2026 being an election year where Congress is going to be more cautious to take up anything that they view as controversial. They're going to try to, anything that they pass this year is going to be what's seen as low-hanging fruit, have a vast amount of support, and really get minimally controversial. And this election year, too, we're running into additional complications there where, of course, as you mentioned, we have very, very tight margins in both the House and the Senate. And, looking at historically, when you look at the first midterm of a presidential administration, usually the party in power does tend to lose seats. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that's going to happen. But, and of course, 1 year, especially in this day and age, is a political eternity. But, as a result, when you do read the tea leaves, it is looking at this point that if the election was held tomorrow, Republicans would lose this narrow majority and Democrats would come into power. And this means that, you may see Democrats kind of holding their breath, looking to temper any Republican accomplishments this year, and then also trying to line up some priorities for them when they view that they may come to power in 2027. So that may cause some legislative gridlock upcoming this year.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So, Sean, kind of in that similar vein, Congress recently released their legislative calendars for 2026. The House and the Senate put theirs out. In looking at the calendars, what trends do you see, and what are good times for the fire service to be planning to engage?
Thank you, Michaela. So as we can see on the calendar, both chambers will return the first week of January. January is going to be pretty busy for both chambers. We're currently operating on a continuing resolution that expires on January 30th. So looks like the Senate is out 1 week that month, but I would expect a lot of activity on Congress. For the remainder of the schedule, as Ryan mentioned, this isn't we're going into an election year, which is always an abbreviated congressional calendar. So the House is in for 29 weeks, the Senate for 31. That doesn't sound like a lot, but those weeks that they're not in DC, they're having district work periods where they're meeting with constituents working in the district. So that leads into critical times when the fire service can engage. The most critical time, and probably the most impactful, would be anyone who should come to Washington, D.C. in March for the CFSI Symposium and dinner, where we'll have a lot of fire service leaders on Capitol Hill meeting with their members. That said, not to draw away from Michaela's event, but you do not have to come to Washington, D.C. to meet with your members of Congress. As I alluded to, they have district work periods. They have staff in the districts in the states. So take those opportunities as well as coming to DC to meet with them when they're back home. Attend their town hall meetings, invite them to the firehouse to tour and meet the crew. Engagement does not have to happen in Washington, DC. So take advantage of this abbreviated schedule. As you can see, in August, they're out of session for 3 weeks, but they're going to be back home during those 3 weeks. Great time to hit them. But these first few months are going to be critical because not only do we have the continuing resolution expiring in the end of January, we expect the president's budget to come out in mid-March. And I'm sure we'll talk about appropriations in a little bit, but it'll be critical for us to weigh in with members of Congress on those budget numbers and what they reflect on what the fire service actually needs.
Thanks, Sean. And, Ken, moving to you, despite the congressional calendar and some of the challenges that we've faced in the first year of the session, so each session is 2 years, 25, this is 25 and 26. We've seen some successes already where, the National Fire Academy was shut down and then we were able to get that reinstated. Can you talk about what made that effort successful and how we can build on that model moving into 2026?
Yeah, thanks, Michaela. I think it ties off what Sean was just saying, or ties into that. This has been a weird year. Okay, so we saw the National Fire Academy get closed twice. I know we've seen like the PSOB office, they lost a lot of staff. The poor staff who work for the NIOSH Firefighter Fatality Investigation and Prevention Program, I think those staff have been laid off or furloughed 3 or 4 times this year. We had the longest government shutdown on record, 43 days. We had the case where we were just lucky to get the AFG and SAFER grants for fiscal year 2024 released. Literally, they had to be released by October 1st. I think the notifications went out like around September 30th, September 29th. And then, of course, the FEMA Go system got shut down. So then for like 43 days, nobody could actually accept their grants. So, and this is just going to keep going on. We've got until January 30th for Congress to pass the appropriations bills for DHS, or the Fire Academy gets shut down yet again. So getting to Sean's point, it's important more than before for members of the fire service to reach out and get to know the staff of both the senators and representatives who cover fire service issues. It's only by building a strong relationship with those folks, in the next year or so, that we're going to be successful. When the Fire Academy shut down, yes, the fire groups reached out to the administration. I see Chief Bayshore is on the line here. He to a certain degree was, for the local media, the face of the effort to reopen the Fire Academy. I know he's on different news channels. But more importantly, even here at the IFC, we had 1,000 members of ours reaching out to their congressional offices, asking the members of Congress to weigh in and reopen the Fire Academy. And we know this worked because we would hear from folks, within the administration, that Secretary Noem kept getting all these letters saying reopen the Fire Academy, and she would answer all of them directly. So it put a lot of pressure on the administration to do what we want. And this continued throughout the year. In the beginning, it was the Fire Academy. And then, like I said, we weren't sure if the Homeland Security grants would be released on time. Then we weren't sure that the AFG and SAFER and Fire Prevention and Safety grants would be released online. Then they shut down the FEMA Go program. So you couldn't actually get reimbursed for any expenses. So we suspect going forward, this is just going to continue to be an issue. And really what ends up spurring any type of action is having the members of Congress actually call the administration and the White House and tell them to fix whatever the problem is. And members of Congress aren't going to do that if they hear directly from you. So the best thing to do here as one of your New Year's resolutions is to sit down at your desk, put out a piece of paper, list your 2 senators and list your member of Congress, and then find out who those staffers are who cover fire issues for those 2 senators and that representative. And just assume that you're going to become they are going to become your new best friend for the rest of the year. Because as time goes on, you're going to be constantly calling them to fix whatever it is that's being broken. And only by having the members weigh in are we going to make sure the Fire Academy stays open and we get our grants on time.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, and thanks for walking through several of the other issues. It's a challenging time, and I think we're not seeing, no one really has precedence anymore. It does, the fire service is very well respected, fire and EMS, and the members of Congress want to be hearing from you and you're a trusted resource, but you still have to actually take the step of building the relationship and having the meeting, because they're not just going to give something to you because they feel that they should. You do need to actually ask them for it. So Ken laid out a great New Year's resolution. I would wholeheartedly echo that. And we're going to walk through how exactly to do that later on in this webinar as well. But for right now, what I want to jump on is a little bit of what Ken was saying about AFG and SAFER and what we're seeing with some of the grant programs. So obviously, it's a tough fiscal environment. Ken talked about how we saw the fiscal 24 grants roll out and the challenges with that being very late in the cycle, as opposed to the rolling basis that we've seen before. We are certainly keeping an eye on when the NOFOs are going to be issued for the fiscal 25 rounds, and would welcome hearing any of the feedback that you all are hearing as well. Please make sure to be communicating with us, because we hear what we hear, but if you guys are getting information from FEMA, from the grants, or having a situation with your department or organization, please do contact us, because we can only be helpful if we know what's going on. So some of the things that we're keeping an eye on in 26 is hopefully keeping the grant cycle moving as swiftly as possible, trying to stay away from that September 30th deadline as much as possible so that we have some time to act. I know the FEMA Review Council is meeting tomorrow, and there's supposed to be potentially conversation about a draft report, potentially weighing in on the future of FEMA. That is something that we have been keeping an eye on. CFSI and our partner organizations have put out some thoughts that we have on FEMA review, but also sort of how the fire and emergency services and the federal government can and need to be interacting in the times that we are seeing. There's also been conversations more on the executive order side on federal grant making and what role agencies and political appointees should play in the process vis-a-vis technical review panels, peer review, et cetera. So seeing how that is implemented in the context of the grant programs is going to be very important, as well as the overall idea that we've also seen reflected in a lot of the executive orders about the balance of risk and finance between the federal government and states and localities. So it's the grants have been reauthorized. They were reauthorized last Congress, and that was a battle. So to everyone who assisted with that, thank you. It does take everyone working together, national organizations and everyone on the ground, in order to get things accomplished. And Ken really highlighted that with the NFA. It wasn't, the national groups weighing in had an impact, but so did people hearing from constituents in the states and in the districts. And national groups working in coordination with grassroots is how you get something done. And that's why we're so excited to have you all here today to talk a little bit about how we can be working together. So for AFG and SAFER, the programs are authorized. It's going to be very interesting to see how these conversations evolve, depending on if Congress decides to take up legislative action related to FEMA, or if there are any policy realignments at FEMA. And this is something that we'll be keeping an eye on as well. But what you can be doing today is building your relationships and making sure that you're communicating about the importance of these programs and what they have done for you or for your department or for the fire and emergency services. And that is something that that will never be amiss. You can always share that, and that's always going to be helpful. To move on to some other topics, which I think it's going to be kind of a similar vein as well, but Sean, yours is kind of related to this. Could we talk a little bit about from the NFA closures earlier this year, and also the FEMA reform conversations, they could also be impacting the U.S. Fire Administration. So can you talk a little bit about that, and also how we're hoping to work to support USFA in 2026?
Absolutely, and hopefully things have settled down a little bit with USFA and NFA, but as we've already discussed, we are operating on a continuing resolution, and that always causes a little bit of concern. But the good thing is we have strong leadership at USFA. The Deputy Fire Administrator, Chief Donna Black, is currently the acting fire administrator. Not the role I think she thought she was going to be in, but she's doing an outstanding job of guiding the ship. And she has Superintendent Eric Skablix there, who Superintendent of the National Fire Academy, who is the acting Deputy Administrator. So we have some strong leadership there, as well as really professional staff. They have suffered some cuts, just like every other federal agency, but they are weathering the storm. So we're lucky to have them there. As everyone knows, USFA is our lead federal agency. They are the point of contact for fire service issues within the federal government. They not only coordinate with our state and local first responders, but with other agencies within the federal government. So it's really, really critical that they are appropriately staffed and resourced. The NFA is training over 100,000 firefighters every year. They're pushing out courses to the state level. USFA is coordinating with FEMA on disaster preparedness, mitigation, and response. There's data collection and analysis, as well as launching the new NERA system, which is going to replace NFIRS at the end of January. NFIRS is wrapped up. So one of the things we really continue to do is tell the story of USFA to Congress. And you're going to hear me talk about telling the story a lot today. And we have been successful in that, as we've already discussed with the closure of NFA. Just about, I think, every member of Congress weighed in with the administration about the need to reopen that because they were hearing from local firefighters. I can't tell you the number of new contacts I made with the Hill just because of that one crisis, because they were reaching out to us saying, we're hearing from local firefighters, what can you tell me about this? But we need to keep that up. We need to keep USFA at the forefront. And part of that is making sure they're resourced as well. The authorization for the agency is right around $75 million. That's what our organizations requested it be appropriated at. The White House requested just over 59 million, which was the amount for the previous fiscal year. So there's a little bit of a gulf there. The Senate has not, the Senate Appropriations Committee has not released their fiscal year 26 funding bill for Homeland Security yet, but the House did. The House provided a slight increase over the previous level, just over 60 million, but they also added in an extra 2 million in another account to help with the nearest rollout. I think that's one of the highest levels we've seen USFA at. So it's not at our full authorization level, but we're making progress. Congress is starting to understand the importance of this. With the FEMA Review Council, we're expecting their recommendations to be released very shortly. We'll have to see what FEMA and USFA look coming out of that. But one of the things Michaela mentioned is the excellent white paper that CFSI and the National Advisory Committee organizations put out. If you have not read that, go on CFSI's website, read about it. It really talks about the steps we need to take to make sure USFA is elevated within the federal government, recognized, and properly resourced. So that's a great tool as we continue to move forward with our work at educating our policymakers.
Thanks, Sean. And I think one of the all great points, and one in particular I want to echo, is on the appropriations authorization side. So every year we consistently make asks for AFG and SAFER appropriations, and that's the money that Congress gives to the program to hand out, and also to the U.S. Fire Administration. So we'll have one-pagers up on our website that you can use that will have the updated asks as we move into 26. We're working to finalize those, especially because the current fiscal year is still under discussion, as there was the CR through to the continuing resolution through to January. So as that situation gets resolved, we will keep the papers updated with what the asks are for money for the programs, but in general, echoing that they could always use more money and that it's important to fund them. And yeah, the term of art is appropriations. So moving away a little bit from appropriations and in a slightly different direction, Ryan, I want to turn to you. Could we talk a little bit about FirstNet Authority? And I don't know if reauthorization is the right word, but there's a date coming up for them in 2027. And that's something that we're going to be keeping an eye on in 26 and expecting to work on as well.
Yeah, thank you, Michaela. So as Michaela said, FirstNet Authority has a statutory sunset that is scheduled currently, absent any congressional action, for February 2027. Just a little history on FirstNet. As all of you are aware, I'm sure that FirstNet was established by Congress in 2013, which set aside billions of dollars for public safety to have its own spectrum, deep block spectrum, which is pretty premium spectrum. And this allowed public safety to have both priority and preemption within this spectrum. And that is important because, I'm sure as we've all encountered, even just, as, members of the public just going to major sports events and large crowd gatherings, your phone may not be working as well due to networks being overwhelmed by the amount of space available and just the networks being all jammed up. Unfortunately, public safety communications is no different if they're not on FirstNet. What FirstNet allows is public safety to have the priority on this spectrum to move through and to preempt other users that may be on said spectrum, because there is allowance for what's called secondary users that are managed by the locality as to who may be allowed on the spectrum. It might be which are public safety adjacent, depending on what the locality it lays out. It could be utilities, etc. And so whenever you have any of these large crowd events, you do not have that jam because of FirstNet's, because of the priority and preemption. You also have an increase in interoperability. Of course, as we're all unfortunately aware, FirstNet was created as a recommendation of the 9/11 Commission report, where of course we all heard these stories from 9/11 where public safety communications went down, and folks on scene were relegated to communicating via handwritten pieces of paper being passed back and forth amongst the mass confusion of that event. So this is one of the reasons FirstNet was established, and it's done a great job at fulfilling its mission. Of course, since the network has been built up and stood up, it is established apps that are public safety friendly. It has established deployables that are public safety friendly. Either in areas where existing telecommunications infrastructure can't allow for a proper network, or where a network is down, FirstNet can deploy deployables to an area to stand up many networks for public safety utilize. And again, FirstNet is designed to, be a telecommunications network that directly addresses the concerns of public safety. You do not have to wait in line and compete amongst other interests. Public safety is the name of the game. So that's really why FirstNet has been so important. It's really been a game changer for public safety telecommunications, and again why we all have to start urging Congress, educate them on how is do you have a success story for FirstNet? How has FirstNet improved communications in your jurisdiction? How has it helped with interoperability? Have you had an event where you've had either multiple jurisdictions responding, or there's been a lot of folks on scene and other telecommunications networks have been jammed, but you were able to get through with FirstNet? These are all things that Congress needs to hear as we approach this February 2027 sunset, and why that needs to be lifted. Also just kind of some dynamics in there too. AT&T, FirstNet is pretty much the most successful, largest public-private partnership between NTIA and AT&T, which is the private entity, which received a 25-year contract through a competitive bidding process. This contract was executed in 2017, so it's running through around 2042. So we have, of course, if FirstNet's sunset goes into place, you're going to have this dynamic where the public entity that is set to oversee this public-private partnership pretty much go away. What's going to happen there? That brings me to the initial legislation authorizing a Government Accountability Office report at the 10-year anniversary of FirstNet. And, it was concluded by the Government Accountability Office, which is a nonpartisan office, that there would be significant damage to public safety communications if this sunset comes into fruition. So again, it's important to get the word out. It's important for Congress to act here. And right now, we as the Congressional Fire Services Institute and members of the National Advisory Committee, if we had our exact wish here, our message to Congress has been: first net's not broken, don't fix it, just take away that sunset date. However, we have engaged with with the NTIA and Congress and other fellow federal stakeholders here, and they they have mentioned that there may be some additional tweaks that they may want to make. And but again, we want to kind of keep this as simple as possible, given what we described earlier, with 2026 being an interesting dynamic with getting legislation passed. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see what the legislative language looks like, and we and our respective organizations will keep you all posted there. But in the meantime, please do what you can to educate your members of Congress on the importance of this great program.
Thanks, Ryan. Yep. Bottom line for all of these: educate and build relationships. And Ken, could I ask you to talk a little bit about the lithium-ion battery bill? To be clear, there are other issues that may arise during 2026, but these are some of the ones that we know have existed from 25 coming into 2026 and that we're definitively keeping an eye on.
Yeah. So this really is we started seeing even before the pandemic. I think you all saw all these various e-scooters and e-bikes out on the street. And you saw the different fleets that were out there. We're getting on towards the holidays, so a lot of parents are now getting their kids e-scooters and e-bikes that all have lithium batteries in them. What we've become aware of over the past couple of years, really there was a bad fire, roughly probably in like 2021 or 2022 that got congressional notice. But basically, when these e-bikes or e-scooters, when they overcharge, they do become fire hazards. And the fires are actually, I know the FSRI has done some videos on them that are very frightening. You'll see there's just a whiff of smoke, and then all of a sudden the e-bike will explode faster than the smoke detector can actually notice the whiff of smoke. And when they explode, literally they shoot shoot debris everywhere and basically catch the whole apartment on fire. So this is a real problem. There is a UL standard out there, but there is not really a federal mandate that these e-bikes and e-scooters be built to either the UL standard or any type of other fire safety standard. Congressman Richie Torres, last Congress, he actually introduced a bill to set safety standards for the lithium-ion batteries and their charging components in e-bikes, e-scooters, and other e-mobility devices. The bill was also picked up in the Senate by Senator Gillibrand. They're both from New York. And so for the past two Congresses, we've been trying to pass this legislation, which would require the Consumer Product Safety Commission to set fire safety standards for e-bikes and other e-mobility devices. The House bill is HR 973. It actually passed the House. So we're really hoping that the Senate will just take HR 973. It's a compromise bill, and hopefully we will see it pass the Senate and go to the president for signature. There is a Senate companion bill, like I mentioned, by Senator Gillibrand. That bill is S389. And what we're looking at doing right now is trying to get, twofold. We'd really like to see the Senate just pass the House bill. But right now, the Senate calendar, as we mentioned, is busy. They still have to fund the federal government. They have to figure out what they're doing about the Affordable Care Act subsidies. They have to pass a defense bill. They've got a bunch of other things they're working on. So what we want to show is that there's overwhelming support for this lithium battery legislation. And so we're trying to get as many co-sponsors as possible in the Senate on S389. Because of S389 and HR 973, they're basically the same bill. But so the more that we can get senators to co-sponsor S389, the more we can show that there's enough bipartisan support that they can get the bill passed over in the Senate. So what we're asking is that members of the fire service reach out to their senators and do two things. First, just ask to pass the lithium battery bill, the Setting Consumer Standards for Lithium Ion Batteries Act. So we're asking that the Senate call up and pass HR 973. But the interim, we're asking senators to sign on and co-sponsor S389. At this point, there's about 5 co-sponsors. I think we'd like to get about 60. So as you can see, we got a lot of work here over the holidays. And, don't forget, the more that we kind of waste our time, and the more Congress kind of dilly-dallies, another Christmas is going to come by or other holidays where people are going to be handed, giving their kids these e-bikes, which are basically going to be unregulated and could cause fire hazards in their houses. So the sooner we can get HR 973 passed, the sooner the CPSC can get to work and we can start addressing an emerging fire safety issue.
Thanks, Ken. And that's a perfect lead into our other section. So we've talked about what's going on with Congress, and we've talked about what are some of the issues that we're looking at and working on in 26. So then the question for all of you is, how do you engage? How do you join us in this effort? And what do we need you to do? So the first thing is, you are important and we need you. Everyone's voice matters. And if you don't use it, you're letting someone else speak for you. We do our best to carry the water at the national level and let them know what we're hearing from our membership and what the National Fire Service groups collectively want through the CFSI National Advisory Committee. However, they also need to be hearing from folks on the ground so that they understand that the people who vote for them in their states and districts also have interests in this matter and want to see it move forward. And those two things together is what gets something over the finish line. So your voice is important. And if you're sitting there saying, well, I don't know if I want to engage or can engage, please engage. And I think the bar is a little bit lower than people think. So let's talk through how to do that. So the first thing is, we've talked a lot about finding your members of Congress. You can type it into Google. If you're wondering how to do that, we recommend, I usually use congress.gov. They have a Find Your Members site. That's what the QR code is on this slide. And if you type in your address, it'll pull up who your senators and your representatives are. If you work in a different state or district, you also have a nexus to talk to those representatives and senators as well. So you don't need to limit your scope if you've got a tie into another state or district. Jobs is usually a compelling reason, and the fact that the Fire and Emergency Services is a trusted resource. So once you put in your address and figure out who your members of Congress are, then we need you to be gathering your data. So we've had QR codes on here for some of the one-pagers from CFSI. My colleagues at NFFF, IFF, IFC, and VFC, they all have one-pagers and information too. You can use whichever one is coming to you, whichever one you want. We all talk, obviously, this webinar is proof of that. And we do our best to make sure that we're all working together in concert on whatever the issues of the day are. So if you're getting an email from Ken with the IAFC voter voice, great, run with that. It doesn't have to be particularly complicated. If you're not sure where to go, you're always welcome to start with CFSI and any of the other organizations that you're involved with. You can also be gathering department level data as well. And that is something that they want to understand how your department functions and what you have to share. And then the third thing is, as Ken mentioned, I believe it was Ken, if not, I think it was probably any of our panelists that could have mentioned this. There are several events that are in the DC area. You can tie your meetings into that. You don't have to make a separate trip. So let's do a quick peek. If you're coming down IFF LegCon, the CFSI event in March, NFFF Memorial Weekend, the NVFC Spring Board Conference, any of the IFC events that are in the DC area, please feel free to tie a meeting into that. Come say hey to your senators and representatives while you're in town. It's pretty easy and it's pretty efficient, and it's a way to kind of get 2 goals done in one. But while we're on the actions that you can take today, I want to do a quick lightning round for the panel. So all of us have, in addition to organizational experience, we all were House and Senate staff at one point. So we'll do our best to tell you what would have been compelling to us when we were on the Hill, and also share what we've also kind of learned now from being on the outside making the ask, which is a totally different field than receiving the ask. So I'm going to start. Let's do Sean, Ryan, and then Ken. What types of information should fire department leaders or other organizational leaders be prepared to share when they meet with members of Congress or their staff?
Thank you. And, you've already mentioned talking about state and district specific data. And it's important to have those hard data points. But at the same time, I keep saying, tell your story. What are some of the impacts of these programs on, your department? Have you had a successful grant? Have you had firefighters go to the National Fire Academy? God forbid you've had a line of duty death, but if you have, what was your experience with the PSOB program? Those type of things they need to hear about, as well as the hard data points of how these are important. And what are your challenges? Every fire department has a challenge out there. Find me the fire department that is fully staffed, fully funded, and has no problems, and I will find an award to give them. But you all have unique challenges and you all have some of the same challenges. So weave that into your narrative.
Ryan, let
I
me
think
throw
this,
that to you.
yep. No, I just, yeah, I would copy everything that Sean just said. It's completely true. Telling your story, all that stuff. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges you run into advocating for the fire service on the Hill is risk perception. Everybody just believes that when they call 911, they're going to get super efficient response. That everybody has an ambulance within 2 minutes of their wherever the emergency is occurring. And unfortunately, you all know, being the ones with the boots on the ground, that is far from the case. And explain to them that we are really, in some cases, perilously close to not being able to respond to all the calls that we receive, or where especially when we're talking about AFG and Safer Grant funding, where we've seen tell your members of Congress about how you've seen a substantial increase in costs for turnout gear, etc. How, yes, we have all these great technologies available to us. The gear's gotten that much better, or whatever other piece of equipment. But however, that has come with a mandated increase in cost that is well exceeded inflation. And explain to them that during that same time period, from the high watermark in FY11, we've seen a cut in AFG. We're talking about equipment, or safer. We're talking about recruitment and retention. We've seen a cut in these programs from 405 million to 336 million, and how that's really not cutting the mustard. And Congress really really does need to hear that. So I would just echo that and add on those additional details.
Thanks, Ryan. Ken?
Yeah, I mean, I
What
think
do you got?
the guys hit the highlights. The only thing I would add is the hardest thing with members of Congress is keeping focused on discussion. A lot of times they'll try to tell you what's going on Capitol Hill, to ask you about the local football or basketball team, go get your picture taken. So you've only got about, 5 to 10 to 15 minutes with them. So you got to stay on target and just say, we're here about, funding for AFG and SAFER. We're here about keeping the Fire Academy open. We're here about preserving the federal First Net Authority. We're here about setting fire safe regulations for e-mobility devices, and then just get in and say what you have to say, because you're going to have a minimum amount of time. So the key is to stay focused and not let them kind of take you down the garden path. I think the other thing too to point out, just the more fun part, members of Congress and their staff love challenge coins, and you can give them because it's a local, it's a local state product. It's de minimis. So always bring a bag of challenge coins with you, and feel free to give them to the members of Congress and the staff, because they do appreciate it and they really treasure them.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And you kind of edge into my second question too, which is, all of us are former Hill staff. What's a top tip for meetings that makes it that helps you to sort of build rapport with the staff, and that makes it actionable and compelling for them to take to their boss? And being prepared and bringing something like a challenge coin is a great idea. So actually, Ryan, let me work backwards down the line. Can I go to you and then Sean, and then Ken, if you have another thought, feel free to jump in. I don't want to put you on the spot since you just started us off so perfectly.
Sure thing, absolutely. And no, and also I misspoke earlier when I said FY25 funding for AFG and SAFER was 336. It's 324, so it's even worse than I described. So just something to explain there. But anyway, going to what Michaela said to make it memorable. Again, to reiterate what a lot of folks have said, tell your story. Just whether you've had a success story with a particular program, with a grant, how it increased response capability within that congressperson's district, and why maybe some of their constituents are alive today if it wasn't for these programs. That goes a really long way. Again, I think it was mentioned earlier, members of Congress love data, they love statistics. Anything that you can provide, where the response calls, maybe your response times are insufficient, and that can be helped with federal funding, things of that nature. As Sean said earlier, if there's a department out there that's fully equipped, you get some unheard of reward. But it's definitely driving that home. And again, identifying that difference in risk perception, what you all face day to day, and what those members of Congress may think is, it's just a flick of a switch, no problem. Also, again, the value of follow up. Always follow up. Whether you're meeting, with someone in the district staff, make sure you get the point of contact again for that staffer that handles policy in DC, because again, the district office in your local area may be more constituent focused. DC usually handles policy, so make sure you follow up with that DC staffer. Make them your best friend, as Ken said. And then also, I also find too, you can couple that with an email, and then to really make yourself stand out, a handwritten thank you is such a lost art, and it is really something that can make you stand out. So just some points there.
Thanks, Ryan. Sean, what's your top tip?
Yeah, so I think Ryan covered it great, as well as some of the other stuff we did. So the only thing I would add is, Michaela, you've mentioned on CFSI's website, and I know on MVFC and IFC, you have one pagers that kind of summarize the issues. As my fellow panelists know, congressional staff write a lot of memos. The members, if there's an issue, they want a memo on it explaining the issue, how they, and your recommendations for how they should vote. So make sure you have those one pagers. Don't only bring them in person. I mean, definitely bring them in person. But when you do those follow-ups Ryan mentioned, email them a PDF of it. The more you get comfortable, one thing I always try and do is I try to write the memo for the staff. I will write a memo to the staff with the thought, if they want to, they can cut and paste that right in to save them some time. So the more materials you can provide to make it easier for them to communicate to the member is going to help you expedite that ask.
Yeah, and that's partially the goal of one pagers is it's not quite in memo format, but it's something that they can just copy. I've never written more memos in my life, or faster, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you just need to get it in there. Ken, if you want to chime in, feel free, but I'll also start off so that I don't put you on the spot. A couple of things. The first is make the ask. Don't forget to make the ask. It can feel really uncomfortable, but you can have a great conversation that doesn't actually lead to you asking them anything, and leaving the one pager with the ask on it is not enough. You do have to actually physically state the ask. So that would be my contribution, is no matter how uncomfortable it feels, go in and you'll never lose by going in and building rapport and having a great meeting. That's always fine. But if you really want to knock it out of the park, you got to have the words. You can read it right off the sheet, but it's got to leave your mouth. And then you say, and here's my one pager. Ken, any final thoughts from you?
No, I think you guys hit it all. The only thing I'd add to is just as part of your follow-up, wait a week or two, especially for the bills. You can just go to congress.gov, type in the bill number, and see if your representative or senators have co-sponsored the bill. And if they have not, feel free in like 2 or 3 weeks to follow up with them and say, hey, yeah, I know we met, we talked. Are you guys going to act on this, or are there other concerns that you have, or is there a reason why you haven't signed on to the bill yet? So I think it's helpful. And again, you can get away with it because you're the constituent And at the end of the day, they need you to vote for them, come election day. So they work for you, you pay their salaries, and you get to tell them what to do.
Just maybe don't say that to their face because all of us have had that said to us and it's not always great. Even if it's true. Fire Service Day on the Hill, which is affiliated with the CFSI event, is going to be March 18th. It's not exactly 11 hours, it's probably 9 hours because I took this as close to this as I felt comfortable before finalizing the slides. But there is information on how to join the Hill Day and CFSI's conference. As we get closer to the day, we will be putting up the one-pagers on the issues that we are going to be carrying or talking about specifically on the Hill, which I'm sure you will not be surprised to see many of the topics, probably all of the topics covered here today. And as we finish out the fiscal year with the January continuing resolution conversation, we will kind of see how that's looking and if we need to be adding anything to the agenda for March. With that, if you are part of the CFSI Advocacy Network, you should have received a link from me. Feel free to hop on over there and we can continue the conversation a little bit more specifically tailored to what we have all been working on. Otherwise, thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. As a reminder, please take action now by identifying your members of Congress, gathering your department or organization's data and stories, staying engaged with the National Fire Service Organization, and using your voice and sharing your stories. Set up those meetings, send those emails, build those relationships. That is the best thing that we can all be doing to move the fire and emergency services forward and make sure that we are getting what we need. We are recording this and hope to share a recording with all of the registrants, including the slides from today with the QR codes, etc. Again, if you're with the CFSI Advocacy Network, please jump to the meeting link. And to everybody else, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we will see you next time.